Hey everyone, Yoda here. Welcome back to my video series of ranking and reviewing the Star Wars films from worst to best, my own personal biased opinion order. Today we're going to be talking about the number 6 spot on my list, which last time I stated might be a bit of a controversial one. Because one thing I love is that, the prequels, they do get a whole lot more love today than they did back then. When back in the day, when they were first coming out, everyone just pretty much hated on them. But I do like that they're getting more love today. Because, I'm not the biggest fan of the prequels myself, as I've stated, and I definitely have issues with those movies, even though on paper they're a great story. I just have issues and think they could have been executed better, most of them. And so I definitely have my issues with those movies, but I never thought they deserved the amount of hate that they got, back in the day when they first originally came out. So it's cool to see that the prequels are getting more love today. This film, I feel like ranking this film that I'm about to talk about, the number 6 spot, might be controversial though, because out of all the films of the prequel trilogy that have way more love today, that are hold to a much higher standard than they were, this film is definitely at the top of the list. Today, I'm going to be ranking and reviewing Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Because this film feels like it's held on like a god tier level by the fans today. People absolutely love this film and see it as like a masterpiece. A lot of Star Wars fans, I've noticed. Again, that's the thing with the Star Wars fan base today. It's so polarized. It seems like people either seem to absolutely love a movie, it's god tier, or it's it has no flaws, or it's on the opposite end of the spectrum. Where it's this movie is a freaking complete mess. It's there's no in between. Me, however, I do think this is obviously, yes, the best of the prequel trilogy by far. It has a lot of awesome masterpiece moments in it, but definitely think it has its flaws. I think the only reason Revenge of the Sith is, considered so much of a better movie today than it was back then is mainly because of, all the better build-up stuff that we've gotten to it, especially with the Star Wars The Clone Wars animated series. Because one of my complaints, within this movie is this was finally in the movie where we got to see, Anakin's transition into Vader, him fully turning to the dark side. This is the origin of Vader that we're finally getting to witness here. And, for the most part, I thought they did it really well. You understand why Anakin's turning to the dark side because of his lust for power and wanting to save Padme. You understand that whole point of view of him turning to the dark side for that. But what you don't understand in this movie, and I feel like it had been way better executed, is his all of a sudden hatred for the Jedi. Now that, again, is something that is done really well, though, today with, the Clone Wars animated series, stuff like that. That was transitioned into really well. You can see with the Clone Wars series, with him losing his Padawan and all the corrupt stuff the Jedi Council did, why he has a hatred for the Jedi, why he may see the holes within the Jedi Council. But when Revenge of the Sith came out back in 2005, when it first came out, his transition to the dark side, his transition into hating the Jedi just seemed completely out of left field. That final fight scene where he's talking with Obi-Wan and he's from my point of view, the Jedi are evil. And Obi-Wan's just you were lost. And it's whoa, we gotta hit the pause button right there. Maybe, try to redeem your so-called brother, Obi-Wan. We're wait, why do you hate the Jedi, Anakin? You always grew up wanting to be a Jedi. I feel like we could have had a conversation there. But again, I understand why Obi-Wan, he saw that Anakin was already too far gone, and he was completely lust hungry, power thirsty for his newfound powers on the dark side. But still, you just feel his hatred for the Jedi just also goes out left field in this movie. It's not as wisely executed or transitioned to as good as it could have been. But again, there are things I do love in this movie, though, and while Anakin's hatred for the Jedi isn't as executed as well, it kind of seems to come out as left field, his other main reason for turning to the dark side, I think, is done wonderfully and is led up to perfectly throughout this sequel trilogy, and that being his complete lust for power and his over-attachment of not wanting to lose the ones that he loves, not wanting to accept the natural ways of death. I think the opening of this movie was for the longest time my favorite opening to a Star Wars film. This movie kicks off amazingly with this freaking space battle, this opening sequence space battle with him and Obi-Wan. That was awesome. And him and Obi-Wan Hayden Christensen and Ian McGregor, they have so much better chemistry together in this film than they did in the last one, which is good because it helps you feel the emotion in their final fight scene at the end. But yeah, they have so much better chemistry in this film. And yeah, this movie starts off with the opening scene of them going through the space battle and then going into having to rescue the Chancellor, having to save Palpatine. And the reason this opening scene was so good and pivotal and important is because this is the first scene when they're fighting Dooku that shows Anakin, tuning into his powers of the dark side. Obi-Wan's knocked unconscious, and Palpatine, we can already see Palpatine being the one that's been manipulating Anakin this whole time. Talks him into killing Dooku, and Dooku is the one, that's telling him, like, you have anger, like, you have hatred and all this stuff, like, but you don't use it. And it's for the first time we get to see Anakin, like, not for the first time, we kind of saw foreshadowed shades of it in episode 2 when he murders the Sand People. But for the first time we get to see him fully in Jedi battle, like, tune into the dark side, and he's able to beat Dooku by doing so, who he wasn't able to beat before. So, with this scene, it shows you that why Anakin would already have a lust for this new power of the dark side, because, he just used it here at the beginning of the movie, and we saw what he was able to do, defeating Dooku like he wasn't able to do before. So, of course, from that opening sequence, of course he would have a lust for, that further power. And again, you get to see Palpatine manipulating him right from the beginning. You can already see where this is going. It's foreshadowed so well. The opening sequence is so good. Now, the only thing I don't like about the opening sequence, the only thing I have a complaint about, is this new General Grievous character. Because, yeah, everyone loves General Grievous the same reason they love Darth Maul. Because it's like, oh, he looks cool. Listen, the Knights of Ren in the new Star Wars sequel trilogy get so much crap and hatred on today because nothing is done with them. No one knows anything about them, so they get bashed on because they're just there, which is a fair criticism. But then people who, like, love the prequel trilogy is just like, yeah, the prequel trilogy introduced so many cool new villains, like Darth Maul, General Grievous. Freaking Darth Maul and General Grievous are the same equivalent to the prequel trilogy that the Knights of Ren are to the sequel trilogy. They're just effing there. It's like, sure, yeah, Darth Maul and General Grievous do way more crap than the Knights of Ren do. They do way more cool things. But they're still just there because you know nothing about them. They're just thrown in there with, like, no character development whatsoever. It's just like, cool. Yeah, General Grievous, he looks really cool in this film, and he's like, again, the concept is awesome. He looks like he could be, like, a really cool character, but, like, he's not a character. He's just a pawn piece that's there in the film, to move the plot along, because you never find out anything about him. It's like, he's this really cool looking guy, same thing they did with Darth Maul, but thankfully Clone Wars redeemed Darth Maul. He's just this really cool looking guy that's, like, just there to further the plot, because you never find out anything about his character, so he's just kind of thrown in there, which I have a problem with, because it's just like, oh, cool, they're rescuing the Chancellor from this General Grievous dude. Who is he? Not important. Okay, thank you, Lucas. Appreciate it. Overall, though, it's not too big of a problem of mine, though, with this film, the whole General Grievous thing, because, at the end of the day, he's just a throwaway character anyways. It's not as bad as, with Darth Maul, who was, like, the main bad of that villain who, like, had potential, who you just decided to throw away. But again, thank you for the Clone Wars for redeeming him. But General Grievous, on the other hand, he's just there to further the plot anyways, and he's just gets thrown away in the middle of the movie anyways. He's just a plot piece, another one of those famous plot pieces in this movie that are used just to make sure that the Jedi are not at the temple when crap goes down. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, of course, Order 66 happens in this movie, which is another, like, great sequence, and that is famous throughout all of Star Wars history. Again, I think the only reason this Order 66 is so popular today, though, and that this whole sequence of Order 66 in the movie is so popular today, is because there's more emotional impact behind it now, with, like, the Clone Wars and everything else, for sure. But with this movie, the Order 66 scene, it just makes me feel like, wow, how much more emotional this would have been when I first watched it if I had ever actually given an F or knew who half these Jedi being killed were. You know what I mean? I feel like the Order 66 scene just proves one of the other flaws of like the prequel trilogies. We never really got to know anyone in the Jedi Council besides the characters we already knew from the original trilogy. So, and of course, they're not going to die because they're in the epic original trilogy. So it's not like it has a high stake emotional impact as it could have. The Order 66 sequence. Either way, though, it's still a beautifully executed sequence to like watch. They do it really well with like the emotional music and this like all the cuts of the different Jedi being turned on by their own like men, the clone troopers. It's still a tragic scene, nonetheless, because you see these people getting turned on by their own guys. There just could have been more emotional impact to it if we actually got to know, the Jedi Council characters more throughout the prequel trilogy, and not had to wait for the Clone Wars to be there to thankfully do that for us. Because, it's amazing all this stuff that the Clone Wars series really has done. But ultimately, the Clone Wars and all the novelizations and stuff, that's part of the expanded universe. And it's there to expand on things, not to explain things that already were. You know what I'm saying? So, and there's several plot points in this movie, several stuff that happens in this movie, like General Grievous' character, stuff like that. That's just there so that we can further the plot to make sure that all the Jedi are gone out of the Jedi Temple once Order 66 happens. Another great example for this is, what about the attack on Kashyyyk with the Wookiees? Like, what are we... And then Yoda's like, oh, great friends I am with the Wookiees. I will go aid them. And you're like, that was literally just there. So that, because people, ever since Return of the Jedi, have really wanted to see Kashyyyk. So it was just put in there for just pure fan service, basically. And again, this is a plot device so the Jedi, most of the Jedi could be away while the whole Order 66 thing was going on, where Anakin had to purge the Jedi Temple and like kill all the rest of the Jedi. Which also ends up being a shame, because in this film, we hardly, as I said, the opening was great, getting to see Anakin take down a Sith Lord and Count Dooku using his new dark side powers. Like, that was great to see. But we never get to see, like, they don't present Darth Vader, like the most iconic villain of all time in the original trilogy. They do not present him as this big threat as much as they should in this film, because we never get to see, Anakin kill any Jedi Masters. At the end of the day, how many Jedi Masters do we get to see Anakin kill Darth Vader in his prime? None! We gotta see him kill a couple of children. Well, actually, we thankfully did not see that. We got the implication. That was pretty strong. But we see that he killed a bunch of Jedi children, and then he lost the battle to Obi-Wan. Like, that was it. He wasn't established as like this big threat as much as he should have been, I feel like. And a lot of complaints that people have of this movie is, the Anakin murdering children thing and this whole really fast transition into the dark side. Like, people like complain how, he goes from killing Mace Windu, because, he wants to help the Emperor. So, he wants the Emperor alive, and Mace is about to kill him, and he feels like he needs the Emperor alive to learn this power that the Emperor has teased him with about being able to save the ones he loves from dying. Which, by the way, that scene of Darth Plagueis the Wise where he, like, tells, Anakin about those powers is so good. It's just such fine manipulation work from Emperor Palpatine. It's so good. But yeah, a big complaint they have is, after that scene where Anakin does help kill Mace Windu to keep the Emperor alive so he can, because he thinks that the Emperor can help him save Padme from dying. After he does that, he's like, what have I done? You see all this regret and denial in Anakin. And then 9 minutes after that, he just goes to no mercy, just killing younglings, not a care in the world given, even though he just helped kill Mace Windu, and he was like, what have I done? To just killing younglings with no problem in like less than 10 minutes. It's a big complaint people have with this movie. But I feel like with him helping kill Mace Windu, and Mace Windu, again, that's another way that you could have established Anakin as a threat. Anakin didn't have to come in and chop off Mace Windu's hand and then have the Emperor do all the rest of the work. You could have had Anakin have a full-on fight scene with Mace Windu, and that would establish his power really cool as this huge threat too. If especially with all the conflict with him and Mace in the film, that would have been cool to see just a fight between those two and Anakin taking him out. At least make the new villain in Vader look somewhat like a powerful threat, like your god. Anyways, I understand though why it was such a big turn to the dark side after that. It's because, once he did help the Emperor in killing Mace Windu, there's pretty much no going back from that point on. Because, if any of the Jedi live after this, including the younglings, even if he lets the younglings go, if any of those younglings grows up, still has that Force-sensitive power, they can come back and try to, destroy him and the Emperor. So they had to murder all the Jedi, otherwise they would come back and, again, put an end to their plans, pretty much. They knew that the Jedi would be a threat. It's what Anakin, again, after he, helps with Mace Windu's murdering, he's like, what have I done? Because he realizes that there is no turning back from that point on. It's not, even if he decided to turn on the Emperor there, Obi-Wan, would just be like, oh man, what happened to Mace? And he'd be like, oh yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he killed him. I got there too late. And then, Yoda and Obi-Wan would just be like, oh, that's interesting, because these, hologram recordings, show you chopping his hand off. Oh, yeah. So either way, there's no turning back from that point. Anakin was effed. So, I understand. Palpatine tells him in that scene that he has to go execute the Jedi and that he can't show any hesitation or anything. So, I understand why Anakin was so merciless at that point, because there really was, he felt like no turning back for him. Palpatine had manipulated him into this situation just so dang well. But yeah, eventually Obi-Wan and Yoda do find some of the recordings in the temple, and they do see all the horrible things that Emperor Palpatine and Anakin have done. And it's just Obi-Wan tells Padme, they find out that Anakin has become way too much of a threat, and, again, it has really escalated to a point where there's no going back for either side now. Either the Jedi have to kill all the Sith, or the Sith have to kill all the Jedi. It's gone to that much of an extreme, and so fortunately, Yoda does send Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan realizes what he has to do, and going and killing Anakin. Even though it's just such a sad scene, such a well acted out scene by Ian McGregor. Again, some of the dialogue is over the top and ridiculous, like when Obi-Wan first gets there to confront Anakin on Mustafar, when he's just like, only a Sith deals in absolutes. And you're just like, do or do not, there is no try. That kind of sounds like an absolute to me. The Empire Strikes Back, anyone? There's some ridiculous over the top dialogue there, but overall, this fight with Anakin at the end of this scene, you can really tell as a sequence of two practically Jedi Masters in their prime going at it. So it's a really well done fight scene, and at the end of it, Ian McGregor does give a really good emotional performance, so you can tell he really doesn't want to have to kill Anakin. And even though it does kind of seem more sadistic leaving there burn to death, does see all the hatred that's consumed him and just leaves him there to be consumed in flames. I mean, a lot of people could say, Anakin, if Obi-Wan would have just killed Anakin there, that it could have, prevented a whole bunch of stuff from happening. Vader never would have come about. It would have been mercy if Obi-Wan would have just killed Anakin instead of just letting him burn there for someone that was like a brother to him. But I don't know, even on that steep hill that they were on, I wouldn't want to go down there and try to stab my lightsaber in his head. It's he had the high ground. He's not giving that up. But still, you feel like he could have at least force pushed him into the lava or something. Either way, though, it's a really well acted out scene there with the emotion from both Obi-Wan and Hayden Christensen. You can tell that Anakin is just consumed with hate, while Obi-Wan is just filled with so much sadness and regret. And they do end up tying off the whole saga really well with this movie. And I did like Yoda and Palpatine's fight as well. I feel like that's a very underrated one. And one thing they do really well in that fight is they show how equally powered Yoda and the Emperor are and just how Yoda basically lost just to a unfortunate set of circumstances and bad luck, falling from all the Senate chamber seats and like losing his lightsaber. But yeah, after that he has to go to exile. As I said, they end off the whole 6 film saga really well. End off George Lucas's saga really well. Where they realize they have to, and Padme ends up going into child labor. She ends up dying in child labor, though, because that's what I'm gonna freaking tell myself, because the way they wrote her off and actually killed her in the movie was effing ridiculous. Okay, I get she doesn't die in child labor. I get that they didn't want her probably to die in child labor, because that would just confirmed, Anakin's fears of her dying in child labor to be true. It would have justified him turning over to the dark side powers a little bit more. But the way they just write her off and kill her, she basically dies of a broken heart. It's just ridiculous. She just gets written off again for plot conveniences to further the plot. She just dies because she has to die. There's no clever way that they come up with how to kill her, unfortunately. So she just dies. But again, the whole sagas ended off really well, because Obi-Wan and Yoda both realize that they have to hide the twins away, since they're both Force sensitive and would be a threat into the Emperor and Vader. And they'd be a threat to the Empire, so they realize they have to hide them. And so, of course, they have the genius idea of taking Luke back to Anakin's home, a place that he would never want to go back to. And then you get to see the Organas adopt Leia, which is cool. And unfortunately, one of the big things with the prequels, there's a lot of just plot conveniences that unfortunately also create a lot of continuity errors with the original trilogy. Because, again, you get the plot convenience of, like, Yoda being away from the Jedi Temple when the Order 66 thing went down, so that he could go help the Wookiees. But you also see him helping Chewbacca, and it's like, Han Solo in the original trilogy does not believe in any of the Jedi or any of that stuff, and even says it in Episode 4. He's like, I don't believe in all that crap. But you have Chewbacca there who can just be like, oh no, I actually served with the great Grandmaster, like Jedi Yoda. I'm like, but just never says anything. Even, to be fair though, even if Chewie did. I mean, if Chewie did say something, the Han still probably wouldn't believe him. It's kind of like when Chewie in Return of the Jedi just like tells the Han that Luke's become a Jedi Master or Jedi Knight or whatever, and like Han's like, Jedi Knight. It's like everyone's full of delusions. But the scene of them hiding the twins also creates like a continuity error with the original trilogy as well, because like in Empire Strikes Back, when Luke flies off to confront Vader way too early, Obi-Wan's like, well, we're screwed. That boy was our only hope. And then Yoda's like, there is another. And you're like, how did Obi-Wan not know that there is another? We literally, in this film, we see that he was there for Leia's birth. Did he just not know that Leia was Force sensitive? Like, I don't know, creates a continuity error scene there. But again, they end off the saga pretty beautifully. It's awesome to see them go back to Tatooine where everything started. Obi-Wan goes and delivers Luke to his new home with, Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. And then we see that twin sunset to end off the film. And it's awesome because we know that's where the New Hope begins. And great way to end off the saga. So ultimately, I do really like this film because it did. Because, on paper, again, all 6 of George Lucas's films that he had envisioned were amazing. Now, 1 through 3, they could have been executed a little bit better, and he was given a bit too much control, even though he did ask for people to help him on these films. But he was given full control, and ultimately it could have been handled better, executed better. But ultimately, this film did tie Lucas's overall story and vision together really well. And I enjoy Revenge of the Sith, and it's even a better film today, with the Clone Wars and everything we've gone. But unfortunately, when I first saw it, wasn't as greatly executed as it could have been in most parts without the Clone Wars. But overall, ties the whole 6-part saga together beautifully. Ties Anakin's story arc together beautifully, I thought. And for me, Revenge of the Sith gets 4 out of 5 Kyber crystals. But yeah, let me know y'all's thoughts on Revenge of the Sith. Love to have a discussion with y'all in the comments below. And I'll see y'all for my next Star Wars review next time. Find out what my number 5 spot is. See y'all then. Peace.